A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. At that time, Jesus said to his disciples, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. It was also said, 'Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce.' But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, makes her an adulteress, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Jesus Christ. I am torn this morning between the beauty of the first reading and the hardness of the Gospel. In the first reading, we have this amazing passage where God is coming to the prophet. And very often the images that we have of God is that the Lord God comes with might. The Lord God comes with splendor. The Lord God, the host of armies, trumpets his arrival. But in the first reading this morning, the Lord God comes with silence. God comes in the smallness and the stillness, not in the great thundering winds or the tumultuous earthquakes does God make his presence known to his prophet. But he comes in the silence, he comes in the gentleness. A beautiful image of God is created as the gentle God. It should make us wonder what kind of space we create to encounter this gentle God in our own lives. What kind of environment we create, both in our hearts and in our homes, to welcome this God who speaks in silence, who speaks in gentleness. How busy, how troubled are our hearts, how full of noise they are in today's world. Concerns and cares, trials, challenges and difficulties, they fill up our lives, consume our inner being, and we no longer have space, silent space, gentle space to leave for God to speak. So too in our homes, with the hustle and bustle of everyday life, children coming and going, work schedules, favorite TV shows, we leave so little room for the God of gentleness who speaks in silence to come and converse with us. And so a great challenge today, my dear brothers and sisters, based on the first reading, is what kind of space do we create in our lives? In here and out there. to reach us. The challenges are different for each and every one of us, but the question remains the same, and the question remains pertinent. I offer you no answers this morning. I simply ask you to reflect on your own situation, whether you're a teenager, whether you're in middle age or in old age. What kind of space have you made? What kind of space is there for God in your life? And now in the Gospel, we have been focusing for these last 3 days on the person of Christ, who fulfills the law and the prophets, who fulfills the Old Testament and validates it, does not come to abolish it. Yesterday, we focused on what that fulfillment meant in the context of the spirit of the Old Testament, the spirit of the law and the prophets, to bring one closer in relationship to God. Not just simply to follow rules and regulations on a page and by the power of those rules and regulations be saved. No, but to be changed inwardly and brought closer to God inwardly. Today, we look at the very reality of sin. The Gospel tells us that sin happens, that we will all, at some stage, fall subject to its power. And then the Gospel says something shocking. It's asking us to lop off limbs rather than entertain sin. And if we had to be honest with ourselves, each and every one of us, if we had to be open and honest with ourselves, more than one of us would have lost more than one limb by now. We have eyes that lust, and not only over others, but over other things. How often have we looked at somebody's car and thought to ourselves, I can imagine myself in that, and then carried on with those thoughts, leading to jealousy, envy. How often have we sinned in other ways? Carrying things in our hearts that we should not have carried. Anger, hatred, intolerance, pride. How often have we done things that we are not proud of? The Gospel today asks us, in a stark, horrific fashion, to avoid these things to the best of our abilities when they present themselves. And they will present themselves. They have presented themselves. The Gospel asks us to struggle against them. In the words of St. Paul coming later in his writings, to put on the armor of Christ so that we can overcome the temptations of life. This lopping off of body parts is not to be taken literally, but it's to shock us into action. Wouldn't you rather avoid this thing now, whatever it may be, that gives you temporary relief, temporary satisfaction, temporary pleasure? Wouldn't you rather avoid that now and enter the kingdom of heaven than give into that in this moment and lose eternity? That's the simple message of the gospel today. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, 2 questions to consider. In the first part of this homily, we looked at the first reading. What kind of space have we made in our lives, in our hearts and in our homes, for the God of gentleness? And how have we, throughout our lives, fared in this great contest with sin? How have we resisted? And what will we do in the future? Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. What will we do in the future when sin, once more, comes knocking at our door? Amen.